Hi, everybody, and welcome to Matrix Live Season 3, Episode 13. Apologies to any Triskai decaphobics out there. And I'm here today with Bruno. Hello, Bruno.
Hello.
Thank you very much for sparing a few minutes to talk to us whilst you are orbiting the London office of Matrix Land in order to have a chat about the Riot redesign.
Yes.
So the reason we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the redesign is that as we speak, I think, possibly, we're cutting a release candidate.
Yeah, not quite yet, but this afternoon.
Okay, yeah, by the end of the day, and so we've got like 2 hours or so left, we're going to cut the first release candidate of the whole new, totally redesigned Riot Web. And Bruno's been leading the work on doing all the implementing basically the skin that we came up with back in May or April of last year. And it's a little bit of an embarrassment in some ways that we got this beautiful skin all the way back then and then only managed to get working on it in
October.
Yeah, which is a bit unfortunate, honestly. This was partially because Bruno wasn't working with us until July or so.
Yes.
And also because there was a lot of stuff that needed to land first, particularly lazy loading members, which we've spoken about a lot before in terms of efficiently loading only the membership data and only the JSON events, the people who are talking actively in the room, rather than the random 20,000 people in Matrix HQ or whatever it might happen to be. So after doing all the lazy loading stuff, I guess it was around October or so, or possibly November, that we started working on the redesign itself.
Yes.
So tell us, Bruno, how's it been? No pressure.
Yeah, it's been great. Very excited that this is soon going to be out the door and people will be using it. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on if anyone has used it already, the room sublists are now resizable, and spent a lot of time on that, several iterations of how to do that layout, persist it, restore it on load. First tried to do it with CSS and Flexbox, but in the end that wasn't flexible enough, so together we ended up implementing a layout for that in JavaScript, which seems to work well enough now.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a real controversial one because if people have been using Riot for a long time, back when it was Vector and it was Baby Blue, or even before we even put CSS on it, we used to just have a great big list of rooms down the left-hand side, and they were ordered based on activity, remote activity, in terms of last time somebody spoke in the room. All kind of straightforward, and it's how WhatsApp and Telegram and things work today. But when you get up to hundreds, let alone thousands of rooms, it all falls apart quite badly. And we found that people got really upset that the direct messages were getting muddled up with the rooms, and also that busy rooms would just drown your DMs. So you might have a notification from some important DM, and then because you're in a bunch of loud IRC channels, suddenly you'll get pushed off the bottom and you miss the notification, and it's a mess. So then we split it into sublists and split the direct messages from the rooms, which was something of an improvement, except again it was still a massive list, and the problem is if you again had more than a page's worth of DMs, suddenly you can't see the notifications anymore for any of the rooms, or vice versa. If you scroll up and you look at the rooms, you suddenly can't see the DMs anymore. So about 2.5 years ago, we did a design session with the agency we were working with at the time to come up with the idea of what became called sticky headers, where you would at least keep the stickinesses at the top and bottom of the list. A bit like iOS does when you're scrolling through a big
Contacts list.
Yeah, contacts list is the classic one, that you have bars at the top and the bottom, and you can click on them to jump around. And obviously that's what we then had all the way through until Bruno implemented these new designs. The reason that we moved away from it was because you ended up with quite a weird idiom of a tri-state on each of the room sublists. So a sublist could either be collapsed, or it could have like the first 10 items showing, or it could have all of the items showing. And if you have all of the items showing, then it can be massive. It can be like 4 or 5 pages, and as you find yourself scrolling around, it's basically impossible to at the same time have, say, your favorites, which you'd expect to see visible most of the time, as well as some DMs, if in practice you're in the middle of your room list. So basically the second you start scrolling into a big list, you get completely lost. Now, the good news on that though is that it was only one scroll, which is kind
Yeah.
of nice. And also you could jump rapidly to the different lists by clicking on the sticky headers. But we decided to give it a shot and go for what was originally called, I think, Photoshop kind of semantics. If you imagine one of these IDEs or graphics editing things when you've got a bunch of palettes down the sides and each one is individually scrollable, and that's what we've ended up doing.
Yeah. Um, and now, as a last thing to sort of avoid scrolling altogether, hopefully, is improving the sorting algorithm so the rooms you care about are always on top, so you don't have to scroll necessarily, only when you need to find that specific room you haven't talked in for a while.
Yeah, and honestly, this is we want to get feedback on this. So if you've been using riot.im/develop, or as of a few hours, riot.im/staging, I guess, for the release candidate, or experimental as it was before that. If you, we want to hear whether people feel like they are claustrophobic in the new left panel, because you do have these, we call them almost letterboxes of relatively short sublists which you have to scroll within. And even though this now means that you can always see your favorites and you can decide precisely how much favorites to view, and you can always see your rooms or your DMs depending on what you want, you do find yourself having to scroll individually within it, which is a little bit of a retrograde step from having one nice big scroll. And also, it's, I don't know, what was I going to say? That but especially if you have less vertical real estate in total, you can end up with some very narrow letterboxes, like if you're on a MacBook Air or a 13-inch screen or whatever. So if you're feeling claustrophobic in there, please yell and let us know about it. If conversely you think it's an improvement, heaven forbid, we also want to hear about it. But what you were just saying, Bruno, with the sorting, I think we're going to ship it as it is with the letterboxes, but we're going to hopefully, are we going to have time to improve the sorting algorithm?
I hope so. That's what I'm looking into now.
Ah, perfect. Right. So which sorting algorithm are you looking at?
The one we call NADS or designers algorithm, where you put the ones you recently viewed on top as well as the one with red badges.
Right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because we basically have a use case where you want to rapidly get back to rooms which you've been recently looking at, because it can be really annoying if you get a notification in a room, you click on it, and that the act of it now being red means it drops all the way to the bottom of the list because it's no longer got an unread notification. Then you want to get back to where you were, and you're basically having to jump around the list, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
Also ties in with the work that Travis did on pinned notifications in a list. I think we're going to turn on by default the idea that the list always has your mentions at the top, then your notifications, then your unread rooms, and then everything else, which we call naked rooms, or idle rooms if you want to be slightly less graphic. And so yeah, basically it's the idea that rooms you have viewed count as ones which you have interacted with and therefore should be towards the top.
It might not make it into the ERC, probably not though.
Yeah, probably not, but I think we can definitely chuck it as a labs thing at least, and add that behind labs for the actual release.
Yeah. What else?
So I guess one of the things we did on the left panel was to kill custom tags, much to the horror of all 50, 100 power users who hopelessly depend on custom tags with the previous UI. And so yesterday we decided, slightly controversially, much to Tom's dismay, Tom or Lampholder being the delivery manager for Riot, and he made the mistake of taking the day off and came back and discovered that I persuaded Bruno that clearly it was vital that we put custom tags back in. Sorry, my bad. But we now have custom tags back in.
Yes, behind the labs feature, so if you can't see them, go to the new settings of the labs.
And how do they work?
They work. They might need a bit more refinement.
So what does the UI look like?
So in the left panel, the tag panel, which might be disabled for some people, you have an avatar for every tag. The avatar is based on the name of the tag, and then they're basically toggles. And enabling a toggle will make the sublist appear in the room list.
Yeah.
So you can toggle on and off every custom tag you have. They're all toggled off by default. Um, and yeah, you basically add more sections, scrollable sections. So yeah, to make sure that you're not having too much section on the screen, you can toggle them off.
Well, yeah. So basically, I think we've had some fairly mixed feedback on that so far. Hopefully, it's better than not having the custom tags at all, but we'll certainly be fiddling with it more. And it's kind of fun because the left panel with the communities and now the tags was always meant to basically be used both for tags and communities. And we still haven't quite worked out what we're doing with communities, although it's literally next up now that 1.0 of Matrix is pretty much cut. And one of the things we might do is to turn these tags into private communities and put the right UI on it to make it much, much easier for people to create. Well, they function the same as tags do today, except in practice they use the same engine as communities and the same sort of tools. They'll probably still have the split that the top half is communities and the bottom half is tags, or sorry, private communities. Not even private, it's more personal communities versus shared communities. So it would be shared stuff like the Discord servers or Slack workspaces you're in, and then the other bottom half would be your my personal contacts, my IRC channels, my whatever it is. So we haven't got that in time for the redesign, alas, but everything else is there. So what else? So we've got all of the resizable stuff.
Yes, the UI is now a lot more customizable in general.
Really exciting. Obviously, it looks better thanks to Yoni for the original design and Nad for all of the updates and upgrades which he's done over the last couple of months.
Yeah, the whole authentication looks very nice.
Yeah, so we've got entirely new authentication flows through the whole thing, and we've also gone and split the homepage into two separate pages. So the homepage is the random bunch of information you get in the right panel when you first log into Riot, or if you first open up Riot. And we thought this is actually a bit clunky and weird as a first time experience, that it's much nicer to have a nice landing page and a nice kind of welcome thing, which gives you much fewer options, or many fewer options, like I think in practice we can give you login, register, room directory, or chat to Riot bot, or help basically, and that's it now. That's the first thing you see, and you don't get the Chrome of the app. You get it on the beautiful photo background, and then if you either deep link into it or if you click one of those buttons, it's only then that you actually get moved into the real app. And I'm hoping that will feel a lot less imposing and scary.
Yeah, than just landing in an empty app by default.
Yeah, the empty app thing, I think happened by accident, honestly, because originally, and today, we want to make sure that rooms are accessible as guests. So you should be able to deep link in, knowing nothing about Matrix or Riot, and see the scroll back, peek into the room, and it's only when you join the room that you are forced to create an account and get talking. So we can still do that, but the fact that the initial onboarding meant that you got dumped into a completely blank, peaked, non-existent room, and kind of a thinker. So hopefully killing it off now is for the best.
Yeah. Another thing I like is the new member info panel. It's a bit of a detail, but
no, it's really nice.
And we're gonna even improve further on it in the future. But yeah, the avatar is now full size, which I think is really nice.
New end-to-end iconography and UI everywhere. So we've taken out the big scary end-to-end is beta logo warning, because that's pretty much out of beta now. And we've also shifted it so that you only get warned when there is a unverified device, as opposed to constantly reminding you on every message that it's encrypted, which makes things a lot less noisy. We need to refine that a little bit more, but it's all very much cosmetic tweaks at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously, on end-to-end in general, there is a massive amount of work that's been going on to try to land key verification by short authentication strings, online backups, and cross-signing. Now, what we've decided to ship in the end is the online backup stuff, also known as secure message recovery. I think we might need to tweak the wording on that, change it to just be called online key backup or something. And that pretty much works. It's also implemented now on mobile, and we're hoping to ship iOS and Android releases of that next week in sync with Riot Redesign itself going live, which is planned for Wednesday or Thursday at the moment. And what else? The verification stuff also works. If people had the misfortune of seeing my FOSDEM demo at the weekend, you saw that we were comparing hex digits. Literally after watching the video of how that looks and how it felt demoing, we've changed that to probably, hopefully, be emoji comparisons, which is a bit controversial again. So people are saying, hey, Bruno, have you got apple, aubergine, panda, Father Christmas, skis? And you'll say something back to me. And we're hoping that will be easier than expecting people to say 6F, DE, 43, 5F, 5F, 9D, or even worse, saying 80E or something, and having people have a big fight over whether was that 80 or was that 8E or was that 80E and all that crap.
Keeping that just as a backup for clients that don't support the emoji flow.
Yeah, so we'll keep it for, we're doing decimal instead, because I reckon it's easier to do 12 decimal numbers than it is to do like 8 hex numbers. And probably easier than 6 emoji. But we honestly, we want to try it, we want to hallway test it, we want to get feedback from you guys on whether it's a terrible idea or not to compare emoji. We'll also be putting little labels next to the emoji so that if you're not sure whether this is an apple or a strawberry or a tomato or a cricket ball or one of these, then you can have a label to tell you that it is indeed a massive ball of elastic bands. So there's that.
Cross-signing.
Cross-signing is punted for now. There's a lot more work needed to get it final, and we've already redesigned it twice now. We had the original one that was me and Dave and Hubert. Then Eric got involved, and there's an Eric Hubert version that they're now that is now the implemented one. However, that produces some problems about where you get your signing keys from, and it actually stops you being able to verify people purely based on comparing the verifying somebody. So now you have to enter your recovery key if you want to cross-sign somebody, I think it's fair to say. At which point you end up entering your recovery key much more frequently than we ever intended. At which point you start to wonder whether your login for your account should be your recovery key and whether we should shift for it to cryptography challenge-based login passwords. And basically, we're in the middle of yet another rabbit hole, reevaluating how that works. And we don't want to block the good stuff that we have already on it, so we're doing this kind of 2/3 release for the redesign, hopefully, although I'm not sure how much of it has actually landed at this point. And God knows how many bugs we're going to get whilst testing the release candidate over the next 3-4 days.
Yeah.
But the idea, at least, is that we will have verification backup and what we call trust on decrypt, which means that if you do know your passphrase, then you at least are trusted. But we don't yet have the ability for me to sign all of my different devices such that if you trust one device, you automatically trust the others. What else are we doing in this thing? This is like the biggest release of Riot ever, if you haven't got the message.
Just visual polish all around in every corner. And
typing notifications,
right.
Totally changed. Now my iMessage, so much nicer, it's untrue.
Yes.
Status bar you hardly ever see, thank God.
Yeah.
There's still some bugs on jumping on the timeline that we need to look at. I also have a PR that hasn't landed yet, which finally supports retina images properly. If you use a Mac like me and you're fed up with taking a screenshot, posting it into the room, and you literally have a double high, massive dialogue, whereas now in theory that should be solved, but I don't think we're going to get that in time, because I bet it's going to break the scrolling even more because it goes and calculates the scroll offsets in terms of the retina resolution and all that sort of crap. What else are we trying to get in?
Settings.
Oh God, how did we forget settings? So Travis has completely overhauled and rewritten all the settings UI, which was something ironically he started working on, I think, 2 years ago, before he ever started working on Matrix full-time as his day job. And so it's kind of proper full circle for him. We've gone and taken both the granular settings stuff that he did ages ago, which is how all of Riot settings work, which is a thing of beauty in my mind at least, in that you can take any setting and you can override it per device, per account, per room, per user per room, it's that level, arbitrary granularity. And now he's going to put this massive tab-based UI on it, which is just unrecognizable in terms of usability.
Yeah.
We once did a hallway testing thing in the early days of Riot and got a whole bunch of people to record an hour of using Riot for the first time. It's one of the most depressing things I've ever done. One of the guys was a Google project manager, product manager, relatively high up, and hearing his stream of consciousness as he played with the app was not the most flattering thing, and settings was the thing that pushed him over the edge, as he described it, as a stream of visual vomit, and I don't think he's wrong. But the vomit is now gone, Travis has cleaned it up.
Yeah, it looks so much better.
Yeah, that's good. What other massive things have we forgotten? Have I forgotten? New colour scheme on Riot Mobile. We haven't done a full rework of Riot Mobile yet. On Android, obviously, Riot X is the complete rework, coming real soon now, as in at least a few months away, but it's on the way. On iOS, not sure how we'll make it work with a new look, but in practice, we've updated the colour scheme for both of them to roughly match the new style of that.
Yeah.
I've already had fan mail coming through from people saying thank you for getting rid of the green. So.
Those are the big things, yeah.
There's a bunch of really sexy stuff that we did for a couple of random demos which we were hoping to squeeze in. And there was one slightly stressful moment where I persuaded Bruno that we should merge a very experimental one of those in order to have even more stuff to play around with at FOSDEM. And it lasted, a week, 2 weeks or so, and then got backed out again. We won't spoil the surprise of what that was. Trust me, it kicks ass when it's there, but we might possibly be getting back to that after 1.0.
Yeah.
That's probably about it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bruno, for doing all of the all of the sort of general cosmetic aesthetic, bringing it up to speed, replacing all of my ugly SVGs and object tags of years gone by with nicely CSS masked SVGs. Do we even have any object tags left anymore?
We do, but one more thing we didn't mention is the dark team, which we really hope to get in before the release. If not, it will be straight after, but I think we can squeeze it in.
Yeah, it's not going to be in the release candidate, but hopefully it's just a simple matter of CSS.
Yeah.
To go and get that to land in time for the release, because we know how many people love dark themes. I love it too. One can always just hit the invert button, of course, in your accessibility options on macOS. I'm sure Windows has the same thing. Makes the photos look just a little bit funny, but at least it's dark. But hopefully you won't have to revert to that, and we'll get it in.
Yeah. The idea is basically to get the whole UI polished, and then it's just one sweep over the CSS to make a dark theme, as opposed to having to update it every time we change something.
Yeah, it would have been such a pain in the ass to keep incrementally doing it time and time again.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for it, and thanks for taking the time out from the final crunch. That's clearly what you want to be doing, like 2 hours before casting the final release candidate. Is the thing you've been working on for the last 4 months, is to go and mess around in front of a video camera.
Yeah.
I made the most of you being over here, and
pleasure.
thanks again.
Yeah, cheers.
Bye, everybody.